All right, so hello, Denise, and thank you for joining me on the Comedy Time Capsule. I wanted to ask you about your own experiences with the Nicolettes and the intersection and that whole phase of comedy that you were part of. But before we get into all that, can you say a little bit about how you came to San Francisco and why you were there?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I came to San Francisco at the tail end of the Summer of Love, August 1967. And I came to attend San Francisco State University, which had been always the school that I wanted to go to. That was the only one I wanted to go to. And I came, and I had come from the Central Valley, Manteca, and I came with my little mini skirt and tights and little heels, which everyone was wearing in the Central Valley. And I came to San Francisco State, and everybody was wearing bell bottoms and T-shirts, and they were all hippies. And I was like, wow. So it only took me a few months, and then I became a hippie too.
And did you stay? How long did you stay in San Francisco after that, or the Bay Area?
I'm still here.
You're still here. So you moved, and that was it.
That was it.
Okay. And how did you come to start to perform?
Well, because I majored in drama. So I have a degree in, that's what they called it. I guess now they probably call it theater, but they called it drama in those days. So, yeah, I learned to, I did all the classes, learning to act and direct and all the phases of theater. But what I really wanted to be an actress. That was the only thing I had my sights on. So then after college, just kind of was my, my tribe were the people that were in theater. So a group of friends of ours started our own little theater company, experimental theater company after college.
And can you tell me about that?
It was at a time when, what I can say is that the college experience was, they were doing very traditional plays and musicals. And of course, the hippie counterculture movement was rejecting all of that kind of mainstream kind of stuff. And so we wanted to create our own material. And so we wanted to do experimental theater that kind of rejected that more traditional kinds of things. So the guy who, Tom Usher, was the guy who kind of was the leader and former of this theater company, and we changed names all the time. Every time we did a play, we changed the name of the theater company. It's called Blue Lantern Theater, Fantasy Theater. Anyway, so we were studying like Carl Jung's archetypes type things, and studying different theater traditions from other parts of the world, and so then what we wanted to do was to combine that into plays that had music and dance and had this sort of archetypical themes to them. So that's what we did.
Okay, and like, can you explain what experimental theater is for people who may not understand what that is and what that meant for those times?
Well, it was theater outside the mainstream, and we were also um, influenced by, like, at the time, Grotowski was doing all of these towards the poor theater, um, which they were doing things that were outside of the kind of mainstream types of theater traditions, and just trying to find new ways to express ourselves in a theatrical form. So I'm not sure how much more.
No, I think that's good. I think it, like I hear that term so much because I think a lot of comedians kind of started there in the 70s and the 80s, but I don't know if we have experimental theater in the way that it was then. I think people experiment online, but it's not it doesn't feel to have that same kind of essence that it did then.
I think then it was a lot more unpolished. I think now, still, the even though it's kind of new kind of things that people are presenting, it's still in a much more polished format than in those days. In those days, it was kind of funky, and some people called it street theater because there was a lot of political implications of the time, against the war in Vietnam and against the establishment political stances of the time. So, yeah, there were some people that called themselves street theater, and they would go out and it's sort of doing like protest plays.
Okay, so it really encompassed a lot of stuff from more activist things to more just kind of searching for a new way to do theater. So it encompassed a lot.
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
And
now, how did you find the Nicolettes?
How did I find them?
Or how did how did all of that happen? And also, like, I was trying to think about how to describe them, and I have no idea how to describe them. So wherever you want to start with any of that.
Okay, so I was in this theater company that I told you about, and we were doing a play that was called White Blackbird. And it was based on the Anais Nin diaries, if you're familiar with them, which were all the rage at the time with young women. And so me and two other women who were in this company put together this play based on the diaries. We developed it through improv and shaped it around characters that were in the diaries. So we were going around and performing that all over the Bay Area, San Francisco, Berkeley. And at the time, I needed a day job to support all of this experimental theater, which you didn't make any money on, right? So I was working as a cashier at the Mitchell Brothers O'Farrell Theater. And the projectionist there, named Vince, started an after-hours movie program called the Nickelodeon. Actually, it was called the People's Nickelodeon. So it cost a nickel to get in, and it was after midnight, after they closed down the porno movies.
And can you explain what the Mitchell Brothers was for people who don't know the history of it or the context of it?
Well, the Mitchell Brothers were the first ones to present hardcore pornography on the screen. And so they opened this theater at O'Farrell and Polk Street, yeah. And they played these porno films that they made, and they did quite well, made a lot of money doing this. And of course, it was outrageous at the time, and people were outraged that they would put this stuff on the film and it would be open to the public and all this stuff. But like I said, it was kind of part of the counterculture, you know, of doing things that were outside the mainstream. So that when they started the Nickelodeon, like I said, it was kind of like the people that worked there were like me at that time, very young, and just, you know, doing this like as a side or whatever. So we wanted more than just to have this job, which is kind of what led to the People's Nickelodeon. And so it was like at midnight on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and it cost a nickel to get in, and a nickel for the popcorn, and a nickel for the sodas. And then they showed like old Charlie Chaplin movies, or like cult type movies like Reefer Madness and Betty Boop cartoons, and just kind of like off the wall type things. So one day the projectionist, this Vince, he came to see our White Blackbird performance. And afterwards he said, "Hey, why don't you and your other performer friends come to the Nickelodeon and, you know, perform?" And I was like, what do you mean? You know, because the White Blackbird was this serious play, right? With these serious things. I said, "We can't perform that at the Nickelodeon." And he goes, no, just come and be like cheerleaders for the Nickelodeon. And so we tried it out, and I mean, I explain it in the book. I tell that story in the book of the first performance, and we got drunk and stoned, and we were stumbling around. And, but the audience loved it. So we came back, and we just started doing these weekly performances that were just kind of off the cuff improv, just doing what we felt like doing. And it evolved from there. Then some women came up and said, "Hey, that looks like fun. Can we come and join?" And so women just came in and joined the fun, and we evolved from there.
And so, just so that I'm clear on this, it started in the Mitchell Brothers Theater.
You got it right.
Okay. Now, that's so interesting to me. You know, like, yeah, this is why it's so important to get these histories down, because I would have never thought. Now, then Vince moved his Nickelodeon to the intersection, or how did that transition happen? Or was that a different show?
Yeah, it was different. The Nickelodeon came to an end because the Mitchell brothers didn't like what was going on there, so they shut it down.
What didn't they like about it?
It's a long story. I tell it in the book. They saw some people doing drugs in the bathroom, and they were afraid that there was going to be a bust there or something. They just didn't like the whole scene, it was like taking over their theater. They didn't like it. So
Mm.
they shut it down. And so at that point, I mean, that had been our identity. So we're like, well, what are we going to do now? And so we did a few little stunt type things, but then there was another man named Carl Cohen, and he was doing um, every Sunday at the intersection. He had a program that was like the Nickelodeon because he was a film archivist. He had all of these Charlie Chaplin films and Betty Boop cartoons. And so every Sunday he would have a program where he would show them at the intersection and, charge people like $1. So Vince went to him and said, hey, why don't you let the Nicolettes come? They don't have any place to perform. Let them come in and do like 20, 30 minutes, before the movies. And he was a little reluctant, but he said, oh, okay, I'll try it. So twice a month, we started doing this Sunday program at the intersection. And we started developing the more of a little bit more scripted. Before it was almost completely improv. But we started developing a more scripted plays there. So we did that for about a year, or maybe a little over a year. And then we started producing our own shows at the intersection, where we would have, our friends, singers, comedians, different people, musicians and we'd put a whole evening show together.
Okay, so you were both on Sundays for the archive and the performance there, but then started to branch off into your own nights and having
Yes.
kind of a variety show.
Yes, we called it a vaudeville show, but yeah, it was
okay. Okay, all right. And can you say a little bit about what the intersection was? Because it's so strange to me that you all started at a porno theater and then you went to a church.
True, it's true. Yeah, it was what did they call it? Decommissioned church. And so the two guys that kind of ran it decided they wanted to turn it into like an arts venue that was affordable for artists at the time to come in and get started. And so that's why it was so great for us, But, Robin Williams was there and performed. They had like a comedy night in the cellar, where a lot of that, the comedy scene, really got started in San Francisco there. And I was also going to say that at the Nickelodeon thing where we did some with Carl's program, some other performers would come in and perform too, like Freaky Ralph Eno and Guido Sarducci got his start there, performing with the Nicolettes. So it was like kind of a breeding ground for a lot of artists that, were just starting out and just experimenting with different things. So it was a very exciting and fun time.
Yeah, and this was like around 1974,
73, 74.
Okay, because when I interviewed, because I had interviewed Don Novello for my book, who plays Father Guido Sarducci, and he mentioned the Nicolettes and how important that they were, and that it was a feminist group, and just how that the scene was very fun, that the shows were a lot of fun, and that sometimes it paid for the bridge toll back, sometimes not. And also he had mentioned that I asked him to describe the intersection, and he said that it was like performing with friends. And then he also said it was a kind of place that was known for the banana bread, but every once in a while they would forget the bananas.
That's a good description.
Yeah. It seemed to really hit. Can you describe it a little bit more in terms of what did it look like? It was in the basement of a church that was kind of defunct, but it was still kind of a ministry, but very loosely so, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there was the basement. That's where they had it was very small, and it wasn't really a stage, it was like, like basements are, um, uh, and that's where they did the comedy. But they had a stage upstairs that was an actual stage. And I think maybe they could seat 50 to 75 people. And so it was an actual stage, they had lighting. They had, a backdrop in the back. And then there was I remember the stairs to go up. So we would hang out in the basement in the dressing room, which was part of the fun, just hanging out before the show and after the show. And it was right next there. They had a little cafe down there too. And the Nicolettes discovered the storeroom next to the stage for the cafe, and we discovered the nitrous oxide machine to make the thing, and so we used to use it and take the nitrous oxide and inhale it, and then we'd run upstairs and perform. And then it was like after a while, Carl Cohen had to replenish the cartridges because we were using so many. But yeah, it was a real stage, and that we performed on. And then it had a movie screen too, that so they could project the movies. But it wasn't a big fancy thing. It was funky. Like I said, it wasn't like slick or glossy. It was funky.
And were people patient with that funkiness?
Oh yeah,
in terms of the audience.
I mean, I had people that said, they came to see the shows and they're like, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. So it was, it had like this steady audience of people who knew it was going to be like really off the wall, and they loved it for that, Although I will say some people had family members that came that were like, what are you doing? But it was kind of just open. And I think in the comedy thing, it was open mic, right? They had different nights where it was just anybody could come in.
Yeah. So from what I know of, it was started by, oh my God, I'm blocking on his name right now because I was so focused on you. But he had started a workshop down there. And that's where, and then he also started the San Francisco comedy competition too.
Oh yeah. Larry? No. Was his name Larry?
No. I should know it off the top of my head, but
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he was in the scene for years and years and years.
In the green suit, right? Green suit. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I have that. I'm just looking in my book. It was called the Center for the Arts, an intersection of art and religion. Reverend John Williams ran the place as nearly free haven for artists, where people who didn't have an outlet elsewhere could test their material to either sink or swim. Um, At the intersection, there was a coffee gallery, poetry readings, stand-up comics, a film series, the Pitchell Players, the Nicolettes. We did a show with the Pitchell Players too.
And
One.
who were they?
The Pitchell Players, they were like an improv group, sort of like the Committee. And in fact, I think they were an offshoot of the Committee.
Mm.
And
was
so
the Committee going on at the time that the intersection happened?
I think it was kind of petering out, or it was over. And like I said, I think the Pitchell Players kind of came out of that. I think there were a few members that had been in the Committee in the Pitchell Players. And they were playing other places too, but often at the intersection.
And it was Frank Kidder who we were trying to.
All right, yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that came. And so the intersection, I know it moved from like I want to say like the Tenderloin, but then it moved to North Beach, right? Like there was.
Well, when we were there, it was in North Beach on Union Street.
On Union Street. Okay. And North Beach during the 50s and 60s was basically the heart of comedy in terms of modern comedy and changing it with Mort Saul at the Hungry Eye and Phyllis Diller at the Purple Onion. And then in the 70s, it kind of started to get a more absurd kind of comedy, which I think San Francisco reflected so well in terms of Steve Martin, who really started to develop his voice there. Father Guido Sarducci, Robin Williams. Can you kind of talk to, like, I'm very interested in how like the environment creates comedy and how there's a symbiosis there. Can you talk about that at all, or was there any, or was there not?
Well, I think for the Nicolettes, and so we weren't stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of at that point, kind of an ensemble sketch group, but the most important thing for us was that each of the women got to have their own voice and their own say. And that was really, really liberating for us. I mean, most of us grew up in the 50s and, we were kind of socialized to be nice girls and, don't rock the boat and, laugh at the boys' jokes, but don't you make any jokes. So it was very liberating for us to be able to get up on stage and express ourselves through comedy. And, we talked a lot about female sexuality, and that really wasn't being done at all during that period. And so some people thought it was kind of scandalous, but for us, it was like discovering this kind of comedy that was purely female, that we had kept kind of hidden, or, like I said, you didn't tell jokes, those kind of jokes in front of boys. Maybe if you had a slumber party, you would do it with your girlfriends, but not out in public. So getting up on stage and doing these outrageous things and saying these outrageous things and cussing. Oh, women didn't cuss, you know? So getting up on stage and saying, fuck you. I mean, it was just so liberating. You know, it was like, it was just really fun. And so it unleashed this female comedy that we had inside that we had felt like we couldn't do anywhere else.
And that's really interesting to me because at the time there were so few stand-up comics that were women, especially in the Bay Area scene. There wasn't a ton, but there was the Nicolettes, there was Spaghetti Jam, there was Femprov, who would then start to do more in the 80s. And it seemed like women, some of the women who had performed first in an improv group or first in a comedy team. Do you feel like there was more nurturing there, that like women were able to kind of discover their voice within a group of other women that facilitated that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's safety in numbers, right? I mean, I would have never been able to get up on stage and do the things I did if I wasn't with this other group of women who were supporting me and doing the same thing. I mean, that was the whole point, was that we were finding our strength by being a group together. Because there's no way I would have been able to get up and be a stand-up comedian and say those things. I would be too scared.
Well, and I don't think it was only you. It's like doing it alone on a stage at that time may not have been comfortable for the audience, may not have been comfortable for the comic. Like that, it's that strength in numbers. Seems that was something that really kind of facilitated and springboarded it so that I could go up and say fuck you every night at a club now. But
right.
Yeah. But we needed to have that transition there, and also creating something, a female voice that was comedic. Can you say a little bit more about that and what the sketches were like and what they reflected in terms of the female experience?
Well, we went through a period in that time frame where we were doing we would do takeoffs on like we did a show called Alice in Blunderland, and we would have Alice snorting a huge line of coke off of a mirror, and then she falls through the mirror, and then she meets all of these characters, like the white Playboy bunny. And so we just we did these takeoffs to kind of express our type of humor, and that worked really well just because they were 20-30 minute sketches, and then sometimes we would get an original thing, kind of like we did a show because during this time they had the kidnapping of Patty Hearst. So we did a show about being kidnapped and held for ransom for 2,000 pounds of glitter. So we just did these kind of silly and crazy things from our point of view, during that period, we were doing more sketch. Later on, we developed more into a musical comedy theater where we were actually writing full-length scripts and had original music with it. But that was a development. In the intersection time, 73, 74, we were doing, I would call it sketch comedy,
And after the intersection, where did the Nicolettes go, and kind of what was their journey after that?
We got a gig at the Mabuhay Gardens in 1975. So we were the first kind of non-Filipino off-the-wall act that performed at the Mabuhay Gardens.
And where were they at?
They were on Broadway.
Okay.
Later became called the Fab Mab and was taken over by the Punks. But in that we stayed there for 6 months, and we did two, like I think they were like maybe 40-minute sketches. But before, we would do a different one every other week. These we wrote and did the same. You know, it was more this like a play, where it was the same play every night. Although there were two of them that we put together, because we didn't have the one. We did this one called the Miss Hysterical contest, and so we were these and you know, this was near the time when they had all the protests against the Miss America contest, and so we had contestants like mistake, misconception, you know, misinformation. And we did little skits, and then we had a talent contest. And then to determine the winner, we played musical chairs. And we didn't script that, so it was like whoever won. And sometimes it would get kind of like brutal. And then the reigning Miss America, Miss Hysterical, refused to give up her crown and ran off with the crown. So we did that for 6 months there.
And then what?
Then that was the point when we wanted to write a full-length play with original music. And so that's what we did. And we wrote the first one we wrote, it was based on Peter Pan. It was called Peter Pan. What did we call it first? A New Fairy Tale. Peter Pan, A New Fairy Tale. And we made Peter Pan a rock star, you know, at the time in the 70s. And they had these really obnoxious ego rock stars, you know, prancing around and with, you know, with socks in their in their pants. We did a parody of that where Peter Pan was this rock star, and he played at the big rock palace, Never Never Land. And but we made the foil be Vidi the Pirate Queen, her and her manager were gay, and they were trying to take over Peter Pan and knock him out of Never Never Land.
Now, was Peter Pan and other male figures played by other women in the group?
Yeah, we've never had men perform in our group, and it was always the male parts were always performed by the women in drag.
Because, you know, like you watch Monty Python or Kids in the Hall, they didn't have a female in the group. And so they had to play women, which is always like, I'm kind of like, well, can you just hire a woman to be in your group? Can you work with one? So it was great to see the old videos of the Nicolettes and see women having to play men for once, because there's not enough men in the group, because there's no men in the group.
There's no men. Because we did go through a period when we were at the Mabuhay, we were produced by a group of men, and we just found that didn't work for us.
Why?
Well, they wanted to change our material. They wanted us to like tamp it down so it would be more palatable to mainstream. So, you know,
Palatable to the mainstream or palatable to men?
maybe both. Because I told you that we did the one play, Miss Hysterical, but the other one that we did alongside that was it was a parody on rape. It was but it was a man being raped, and then we had all these women who were like parodying. Oh, it was just the way he was dressed. That's why he was raped, that kind of thing. And so that show made people very uncomfortable, and so we didn't want to bow down to that kind of change. We wanted to do what we felt we wanted to express, so just having these men try to influence us that way just rubbed us the wrong way.
And so in terms of the audiences, because I've always heard that San Francisco audiences, especially at that time, were some of the best audiences, and that you could really grow your artistic voice because they were so patient. But I've also heard from interviews with Phyllis Diller that men will not laugh at a woman being funny, especially during that time, unless they were with another woman, or it's their partner, or if they were gay. Gay audiences, totally fine, great, laugh at anything. Did you find what was your impression of the audiences at the time?
Like at the Mabuhay, I mean, we had built in our own kind of following, so people kind of knew what they were getting into for the most part, and so they came for our kind of comedy. But at the Mabuhay, which was on Broadway, sometimes like these people, guys walking up and down the strip, they would come in and think, oh, we're going to see this girly group, and then we'd start doing these shows. And so sometimes they would just, they would heckle. They would heckle us. And so we kind of had to get used to that. Because at first it was like, what? This guy would say, hey, why don't you go get in a cage or something? Or and, we learned pretty much that it was best not to even react to them,
And so just to give people a context, Broadway in North Beach, the Condor Club was across the street from you guys, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
In the Condor Club, there's a plaque on the building now because it was the first place that was bottomless and topless, and they have different dates to denote those two things. And that strip always had a lot of jazz, but also a lot of strip clubs too. And so men went in thinking it was one show, and it was very much something else. And so what kind of heckles? Was it just like take off your top or that kind of thing?
I don't quite remember, a lot of it. Like I said, there was one who was saying, get in your cage or something like that, or I don't really I really can't recall the exact heckles, mm-hmm. but they were misogynist for sure. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to mention, this had been earlier in 1973, but we did a stunt. We called them stunts, and we did one at the Condor Theater. So What we did is we went to thrift stores and got like girls Girl Scout uniforms, or uh, that were big enough that could fit, you know, a grown woman. But and in those days, we're all rather slender. Um, and then we got from Fredericks of Hollywood these plastic breasts. So we had these uniforms on, and we put the plastic breast over them. And we went up to the Condor, and they knew about it. We told them we were coming, but they let us in, and we jumped up on stage in these outfits, and we sang the song, Ain't We Sweet, but we changed the lyrics, and we were going, can I take a peek at your meat?
Just so we get that one more time, can we take a peek at your meat?
Your meat.
Okay.
That was the ending. And so there were all these men in the audience, right, who had come to see the topless show. And when we were up there singing this song, they were like, huh? What's going on? Which was, of course, the whole point of it. And that was when Carol Doda was up there performing.
Yeah, no, it was a big thing there. I'm surprised they even let you on. Was there?
I don't think they knew what they were getting.
Did they think it was just like an amateur night thing? Like, oh, these ladies are gonna come and
yeah, like we were gonna jump up on stage and just do a little fun song, and you know, they my friend Debbie, who got the plastic breast, she was very good at marketing and convincing people of these kinds of doing these things. So she was the one that kind of did it. Okay, here I have the lyrics to the song that we did.
Let's hear it.
Ain't we sweet? See us tripping over our feet. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't we sweet? Just throw a pie in our direction. Oh me, oh my, ain't that erection? Da 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 da. Now I repeat, don't you think we're quite a treat? Well, I ask you very confidentially, can I take a peek at your meat?
And how was that received by this audience? Were they just stunned?
It was mixed, because we had kind of stacked the audience with some of our friends. So some of them were applauding, and like I said, like the regulars were like, huh? What? So it was just, you know, like I said, we called them stunts, and we did a few of those, and they were really fun to do. And again, you couldn't do it if you didn't. I mean, in that one, there was like, I think 12 of us and we marched down Columbus Street with our plastic breasts on. But it, you know, there was safety in numbers, and so we were able to do it.
Yeah, and you know, it's guerrilla the theater.
Yeah.
You know, it is what Sacha Baron Cohen does, is just going into an environment and taking over, and then leaving and getting the hell out. I'm sure.
Get the hell out of there as fast as you can.
What were some of the other stunts? What is another one that was a favorite?
Well, another big one was, you know, the big opera opening every year. San Francisco opera opening's a big deal, and all the rich people come out, and they're in their limousines, and they come up, and then they, you know, get seen by the media and all of that, and then they go in and see the opera and all. Well, we decided, well, we could get a lot of publicity if we could just get in that line and come, and, you know. So we had a friend who had this rainbow colored van, And so we got in the line of the limousines and came up. When we got close, they kind of started getting suspicious. But anyway, we made it up to where the red carpet is, where you jump at, where people come out of their limousines and everybody takes pictures and everything. So we got almost up to there. We had to jump out a little early, but we had friends pretending to be media people, and they came in. They went, "Oh, the Nicolettes," and they ran over and started taking. So media came over and started taking our picture too, and we posed and for the pictures, and then we jumped in the van and took off. And so the press, we were in the Chronicle, and we were on the 11 o'clock news, and they called us non-ticket holders. Non-ticket holders came to the opera. And we said, well, we're just here to be seen. We don't want to see the opera. We just want to be seen.
Which is kind of what a lot of the people there wanted to do anyway.
Right. Exactly. Well, again, it was like the guerrilla kind of thing.
And also, I think both of those kind of point out the absurdity of the event anyway.
Yes.
Which is what I really like about that. So we are almost at an hour here. What else do you want to share that you haven't shared yet?
I think the only thing I can think of is that the point of my book was, of course, to document this history, because, like you said, I did see a lot of times there would be this history of San Francisco theater or comedy, and the Nicolettes would not be in there, and I was like, it was like, we were around for 13 years. That's a long time to survive. So, why is it just forgotten in the dustbin of history? And the other thing that I wanted to point out was, we talked about it a little bit, but the strength of the Nicolettes was the friendships and the bonds between the women. Like I said, it wouldn't have happened if that didn't happen. But it was also the strong takeaway of why it was important. There was women coming together that can, change things.